I know he's bad for me. I see the manipulation, the lies, but I still keep going back. It's like I'm pulled in by something, like I need him. I feel so ashamed that I keep falling for his empty promises. Can someone explain why this relationship feels like an addiction?
Absolutely. The reason this relationship feels like an addiction is because this dynamic that's being described in this question is something that's called a trauma bond. And a trauma bond is an almost addictive response to the chaotic nature of a narcissistic relationship that feels impossible to resist or escape. So let's talk about what that means. What is a trauma bond? Human relationships are composed of attachment. And some attachments can become addictive because of what they do to us emotionally, psychologically, and physically. So, in a trauma bond, there's this oscillation between good treatment and bad treatment. Over time, the good treatment becomes fewer and far between, and it often comes after moments of really low lows or really high pains. And this hot and cold sort of relationship creates a dynamic where someone literally becomes addicted to that good feeling and is willing to tolerate the bad just to get one more experience of good. This is all happening subconsciously. This isn't a choice. But it ends up being that the thing that hurts us also becomes the only thing that can make us feel good again. And so the cycle of the abusive relationship keeps the dynamic building by maintaining this constant spiral from calm to tense to abusive and back to calm. And the more someone's hurt, the more they crave softness. And eventually things can become so scary that the good moments are the only time someone even feels safe. And so this dynamic literally warps your perspective on yourself and your partner and your relationship. You become changed from the inside out. And so this mirrors an addictive response because the bad moments create high levels of adrenaline and cortisol, which cause extreme distress and discomfort in the body. The good moments create an increased level of oxytocin and dopamine. And the human body can start to crave these feel good chemicals. When they're deprived of good feelings, they crave it more and more. And then when the relationship is good again, it feeds the addiction. So you're willing to put up with anything to get one more hit of those chemicals. And this creates an addictive like reaction to the relationship. And then when someone tries to leave, the distress and sadness of being alone and the possible PTSD symptoms that can come forward from the abuse can trick you into thinking you can't survive without the other partner. There's an actual withdrawal reaction towards missing your partner. And then when you return to the relationship, the reconciliation can feel so good, it reinforces this idea that you'll only ever feel good again with them. But we shouldn't feel shame about it. This is not a choice. This is emotional, psychological, and physiological. It is a chemical reaction due to a chaotic relationship, and it often takes a lot of help, support, soothing, and coping to get through the distress of leaving. And not everyone has access to those things. And when we are exposed to a lot of pain, we tunnel vision in on whatever it is we think will give us relief. We may not even know that we can survive without the other person, and we may not know that we can feel good without them. Because for many, this might be their first pain, this might not be their first painful, coercive, or chaotic relationship. So the chaos may even feel familiar to your nervous system. We are not complicit in our own harm. So we cannot be mad at ourselves for being conditioned into accepting something that isn't good for us. And so it's important that we are responding to that like addictive withdrawal feeling to stay away for good. You almost want to treat it like an attempt at sobriety, right? If we want to get sober, then we engage in what's called harm reduction. We use less and less and less of the thing until we're able to cope without it. Some people can go cold turkey, but some people need a slow pulling away. Everyone who's listening kind of just needs to check in on what they need. But we need to remember that unlike addiction, sometimes you're addicted to a substance and your body actually needs it, or you could get sick or die if you just like abruptly stop. That's not true for relationships. You don't actually need to stay connected to this person. You can survive any withdrawals that pop up. They are not your source of feeling good. They are the reason you feel bad. And you can survive through the withdrawal of leaving that person. Eventually, your system will regulate itself. Because this is such a complicated thing, if you do need more information on how to break a trauma bond, there is a How to Break a Trauma Bond series that I've done with you guys here that people can check into. And then I also have a two-part blog about more information about what a trauma bond is, as well as how it can affect you and you can leave it for people who want to explore more.
Thank you so much for that. I have one follow-up question. I'm thinking about, so this question is about like why this relationship feels like an addiction. What are some reasons that for some it can be like very intense addiction and for some less intense? Like, yeah, can you talk about that?
Absolutely. This comes down to the diversity of the human experience. No two human beings are alike. No two relationships are the exact same. So we're all going to experience things a little different, even if they follow the same patterns, right? Let's just use substance for a second. One person could drink a lot, but they might have like biological protection that they never become addicted to that substance. Whereas another person might drink just one time and develop full-blown alcoholism, right? So all of us have very specific individual biological makeups that determine our risk for addiction. The same is true about the way we relate to relationships. It's a little different, of course, it's like different parts of our brain, but the idea is the same. We all have our own predetermined risk of how much is a relationship going to hurt me. And that feels unfair because it is unfair, but that's kind of just like the luck of how we come to be when we're human beings. On top of that, previous experiences with relationships are also going to increase or decrease that risk. If I am really used to and feel very familiar and comfortable in harmful relationships, I'm far more likely to become attached to a harmful relationship. If I don't have a lot of access to supportive relationships to pull me away from the narcissistic partner, I'm going to be much more likely to get pulled back into the withdrawal. If I have challenges with emotional coping or, like tolerating distress, I'm going to have a much harder time tolerating the withdrawal. And depending on how intentional, manipulative, abusive the partner is, that's also going to change the intensity of my high highs and my low lows. And so when you put all of that together, every single person's going to have a different addictive response to this trauma bond based on my makeup, my experiences, and my relationship.